before I kick off, and even do an introduction here, who here is doing data mesh? Who here is thinking of doing data mesh? Okay, that's really interesting. So less than half the room. Who here is doing data fabric? Who here is thinking of doing data fabric? Wow. The very quiet gentleman in the corner. Who here can articulate the difference between data fabric and data mesh? One person nodding. Two. We have a two. Right, so this is going to be a slightly bizarre. Hello? Because SnapLogic is not a data mesh, data fabric company, and we're not a consultancy who try to sell you data mesh and data fabric. The head is by the worst intro title for a presentation, and yet very clear. Connectivity and API management company. We've been around doing architectures for the last 15 years. So why are we here talking about this? And the answer is we're seeing customers do this and come to us with some quite surprising holes that we've been helping them out with, which is kind of a fascinating dynamic. So I'm giving you some context and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. Stand here. So my name's Guy Murphy, client architect from the global team. I am not a 20-something data scientist. Sorry, I missed that window. 25 years in the industry doing integration and data. So I remember when data warehousing was cool and experimental, and a terabyte was a big thing. So, some interesting background. I might be really obvious, but why is there so much confusion? With all due respect for these two awesome companies, because I'm on video, these two IP producing companies have produced a polarizing thing in the marketplace because they had great ideas, and because the other company had another good idea, they seem to spend a lot of time not wanting to talk to each other. And when I talk to customers, they're kind of overlapping concepts. And they decided to give them cool but vague titles that don't really tell you what they're talking about. So outside of maybe 3 accounts I've spoken to in the last 9 months, the reality is there's a lot of confusion. Trying to understand, is it the next mega thing? Is it actually going to happen? The answer is yes. We've actually got customers doing it when we're seeing it happen. We've also got some customers that are saying they're categorically not doing it for very good reasons, but they're going to cherry pick some concepts. We're coming from a little bit more of a, okay, so if you're on this journey, what are we seeing and how are we helping transcend this concept? So, I'm going to start with would you believe, the easiest one of the two. This is Gartner's data fabric. What is it? It's an end-to-end modern data stack that they believe should be automated and, where possible, self-managing. 100% valid until I'm going to talk about some of the things later they seem to have forgotten to include in the stack if you actually want to turn it on at scale to achieve the outcomes they're looking for. Again, I have no issue about it. Quite a lot of these boxes have been there for 20 years. But under the covers, they are talking about a more unified approach to infrastructure management. Data mesh is a little bit more loose, and in a good way, because it's less explicit about the technology and it actually starts talking about the people. Because slide previous, here's a chunk of technology, off you go. But where's the people in this? What's it going to operate? So, it has 4 sub-pieces. And I'm going to come on to this in passing. It has a concept of domain-driven design for a data strategy. I'll touch on that later. Domain-driven's been around for 26 years, by the way. So it's kind of fun that the new is the old new. This is really where the overlap into data fabric is. This is kind of a new bit. This is where we start to see the segue into our domain. Thinking about data as a product. Thinking and effectively thinking about it as a service and therefore having a certain life cycle that you traditionally didn't have data. And then this one, this is actually the revolution for most orgs. This is the bit that the Gartner doesn't really talk about. It's like, whatever. Data fabric is about federation. I'm going to save you about a 20-page write-up, that's it. Sounds simple, can be quite hard. But what does this actually mean? So, effectively, that combined says, probably, in most cases, my line of business is going to take ownership of their data assets. They're going to be the producers, the custodians, and the workers. Anyone disagree? Cool. Then in the middle there's going to be a nice big simple circle that says, and we're going to join all this up and it's going to work. But you're then going to have a modern set of infrastructure, and the bad news is, and an awful lot of legacy if you're not a startup, that has to plug into this. But it's valid. And by the way, I was working in environments where integration as a domain has started going this way approximately 10 years ago. So I would say I have two modes. I'm an integration guy with a data background, or I'm an integration data guy with an integration background. This has become a trend in IT in certain organizations, full stop, lately. So there's nothing wrong with this. When you look at the traditional world, what does it mean? And again, centralized, core managed environment. When you start looking at the reality of the teams, hyper technical teams in the middle, quite often with less business domain knowledge. This side, you have a really rich environment for business context. They are the producers and consumers of this stuff most of the time. Challenge moving forward is not necessarily the technical gurus we saw in the central environment. And this is one of the challenges we're seeing that we're helping to solve, because there's some fundamentals I'm going to touch upon that looks very simple on a PowerPoint. And it's these arrows. It says stuff just moves around software. And it's easy. And it's not a problem. There's a whole domain, an art to this that we're involved with, obviously. So, quick one. Interesting enough, walking the floors, the domain bit of the mesh is actually being talked about a lot at this event. Probably because it's the hardest part. It's this idea of effectively breaking your landscape conceptually into services and saying, where is my data? What is it for? Where's its life cycle? Who owns it? How will it act? This is not a traditional way to view data. Domain-driven actually came out of programmatic code. It was also adopted in the integration space around API strategies, and now it's bleeding this concept of data should be thought about in the same way. Now, where it also gets a little bit tricky is the edge of this. Because this is the other piece I'm seeing is one of the challenges when adopting this is, if finance owns their data, that's great. And if sales owns their data, that's great. And if logistics owns their data, that's great. And if purchasing owns that data, that's great. But how do we do cross-departmental analysis? How do we understand the boundary and where other people are going to grab this if it's not in one centrally managed pool of experts? So this is where people are starting to say you now need to have a data as a service concept inside of this so that people can actually talk to another line of business and say, I need your data to do my day job. How am I going to talk about it if there's not a central team for me to go and harass for that data set? Anybody here have that problem? See, yeah, I'd say about half. So the other half, you're very lucky, or it will happen to you at some point in your careers. So, powerful construct, as I said, might sound a bit esoteric, but this is going to be really key in this shift. I think a lot of technical vendors in this space are missing out. If you don't get the governance and the people right, this is just going to be another cut of technology that won't deliver. So, productization. Suddenly, in the old days, it used to be data's created, it's in movement, it's stored, it's archived, it's killed. That was your data lifecycle. Now it's a product because you have customers and they want to know the change cycle. They are reliant, they are decoupled from your systems, and yet they can't work in the you work. So this is again a different way. Now this is not something you're going to do across everything in your domain, but if you don't do it at the edge of your domain, at the edge of the business for other business units, you either are going to fail because you won't deliver the service, or more worryingly, they're just going to cut and copy all of your data from your domain into theirs, and you're just going to magnify the old problem at velocity everywhere. And I've already read case studies of that happening, where that thought of lack of controlled but access has been missed out, and companies have hit a factor of 10 growth of data because people have just gone, I'm copying 5 years worth of sales data and moving it to the finance domain. Job done. Amazon and Google will love you for that because that's more disk space. Not a great move if you're the data governor trying to work out why is my bill for management going through the roof. So, what's missing? What we believe, and this is where we are coming in, is firstly, nobody is talking about those arrows properly. How? Just because it's federated doesn't mean integration goes away. Actually, we see the increase. It's a strange paradox because everybody is talking to the same systems, the ERPs, the supply chains, the legacy warehouses. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to manage it? And how are you going to make it work? Because it's one thing to cut and paste data into an Excel spreadsheet or a local progress database and think job done. It's another one to say I'm posting a data service that the entire supply chain is reliant on, and if we're not in business. Probably no shock, APIs should be at the heart of this, and that means API governance and control. Again, interesting enough, people are skipping over some interesting that policy management, not just can you get it, should you get it. And do you... I love high tech. We've discovered the dead zone. Testing, 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 and I'm back. Excellent. You've just got to love advanced technology. So API management is key. And actually putting API management not as a IT-centric concept, but at the heart of the productization strategy. And that's very different. Traditionally, the API strategies was something near the B2B space, maybe near the external facing integrations. In this world, it's actually going to be used by every department everywhere. Because it's not just about the technology, it's is it well managed, is it versioned, is it documented, is it accessible, is it secured? Do I know how to integrate to it? Because I'm not just cutting and copying it from one database to another anymore. And interesting enough, again, a lot of people look at data platforms today, paradoxically, and focus on file movement or copying the database. And yet most business strategies are saying they want real time. They want up to date, and they want to feed this back into the process. So that means they've also got to support not just batch and file, but application and event streaming patterns across the layers. Now, today, most platforms will say, that's doable. Here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different technologies to do it, or hand-stripped point-to-point things, and hope none of it breaks. And I've been talking about point-to-point integration for 25 years. And at the moment it's back in vogue, and all I can tell you is the bill will come due in 3 years' time, because it's come due in every other instance where mass production of hard-coded integrations have ever happened. They become fragile, they become expensive, they're hard to maintain. People move on to different departments or leave, and suddenly you're sitting with critical things that no one's documented properly. So, segueing, so what are we about? We're about breaking up some of these concepts, making sure that we've got an environment that you can both build different classes of integration, both quick and dirty, through to enterprise class in a single iPaaS platform for both your data and your app and your streaming, with an API manager at your heart, so that you can actually take cost out of the architecture, drive forward the speed of development. That is one of the major reasons of the federated drive. Get the capability near the demand rather than say 3, 4, 5 steps away from it, and automate both from our platform and using the wider CI/CD and data platforms. So this is how we fit into the wider piece. And again, if you're not a greenfield site, it's a journey, and that's what we see pragmatically. Not many customers are going, throw it all away, next Monday we're just going to turn 2,000 knowledge workers to be completely federated. They're often choosing departments, they're going up to a step. There was a gentleman from the RAF who was openly saying, using about half of the concepts, and they're going to wait, because then they don't think the users are ready for the responsibility of the hard stuff. And the hard stuff is the legacy stuff. Because suddenly being told it's your problem that you've got 25-year-old systems is quite a shock. And they hadn't been exposed to it. Now the journey for us is, yep, app and data integration, 25 years. Automation into federation, that's really the last 5 to 6 years that this has really been kicking off. And this is really where SnapLogic has been focused, and this was our vision. And that automation is something that is quite critical for us, which is taking it from what was a very central IT hardcore developer culture into an environment where business people, business analysts, data analysts can use the technology that would have been a Java or a C++ type of skill set, and give the CXOs the confidence that even though these teams are federated and working at their own pace, you've still got a plane across the organization to understand, is it working? Is it secure? Are the right things happening in the right way? Because the federating piece is great, but not if there's no transparency for impact analysis. Where is this going? We believe that, again, the advent of AI, and we've started a journey in this direction ourselves, about driving this capability far beyond the CIO, CTO office. Currently, I would say we're at the technical business analyst, data analyst, and where we're going to be taking this vision forward is casual knowledge consumers should be able to interact with these platforms. We're not there yet. That's part of the evolution of technology, but this is a radical shift from when I started talking about SOA 15 years ago, where you were hiring literally C++ coders and J2E coders to do simple integrations at scale. So what do we do? So one of the hearts of our strategy is embracing a low-code, no-code environment for supporting all the patterns I've been talking about. So SnapLogic is a single-framed environment. We can run from large ELT and ETL style classic date loading patterns right through to hundreds of TPS streaming environments. We can orchestrate, we can manage, we can transform or not transform as you wish through the same design time into a hybrid infrastructure. What does that mean? It gives you a flexible capability to support the data mesh and the central technology environments It will also close the gap between your data strategy and your application process strategy. And that's again an emerging question I've had, which is for the customers, how do I feed this back to my process? You know, this isn't just driving reporting anymore. We want personalization, we want optimization, we want the data-driven supply chain, we want data-driven maintenance, not just pretty dashboards. And they are very pretty, by the way, nowadays. They're very cool, but that's not the primary use case for this. So this ability to span across the entire landscape and support that productization lifecycle with APIs on the exposure level as well. How are we achieving this? So within our architecture, our platform, we put the API manager as a key component, and with every release it becomes richer and more at the heart of the concept, because again, even within modern data platforms, this idea of the as a service is becoming a preferred design time pattern. Where do we live across one of these meshes? Well, interesting enough, everywhere. Because what we fix is the internal connectivity, the external connectivity, the exposure, the linkage, the governance, and the life cycle. Our independence is also very powerful. I've seen about a third of the customers who were talking to us about these strategies in the last 2 years have flipped from one data platform to another. So that's a good question. Who here has gone from AWS to Azure to Google, just one switch, or seen it happen in the last 3 years? A non-trivial number. Yeah. I've got a utility company in Europe that's actually managed to do all 3 in 6 years. I think they should get a t-shirt. But it's frightening. So what's interesting is every time they flipped, they had to tear all of this down, including the connectivity to their existing systems that weren't changing, and rebuild it from scratch, because that was the policy. Whereas now, we've got separation of concerns, and they had a standard tool in the middle that they said we don't have to reskill if we change in the future. So quite a powerful concept. So I said, I know 10, 15 years sounds like a long time, but this space has actually been emerging for a while. It's just we've hit the peak at the moment of this stuff. So what is it and why is it customers been buying us? Speed to market, the shift in productivity. One of the key aspects of the productivity is speed of development, and speed of development from the non-traditional developers. And some developers get a bit paranoid, but here's the thing. Do you really want to spend your life building integration flows when you could be building interesting UIs, or more critically, business applications that have bigger outcomes? So even when we talk about this and we talk about people, some fewer people doing the work, the reality is they're always repurposed, because these used to be hardcore developers who spent their entire lives hoping this thing wouldn't break every day they woke up. And we're taking that problem away from them so they can go and have a more interesting career, hopefully in the same organization. Rich set of capabilities. We talk about snaps, so these are pre-built connectors, both application and data functions. The whole platform is actually driven by several AIs, and again, this is a big piece of investment we're moving forward to make it more and more intelligent. The design time concept is quite unique. About how you build it is, as you build, you get direct feedback about what you're doing to the data, and that's very unusual in the integration space. Most of the time you build and then turn it on, break it, and then go back and fix it. So and again, this is one of the things that is a bit of a secret sauce, that we reduce the amount of mistakes that the person building will make, because they see the data manipulated as they build out the endpoints in real time. Very different construct. So last slide, we are doing a marketing tour around Europe. This is on the 17th of November. So outside of coming to the stand or going to our website, there's a dedicated event which will be all about us. So rather than having 27 minutes of me waving my hands at you, you could have several hours of this. But more importantly, really dig into the value case, the technology, and the outcomes that I've been talking about today. So, for being with me, I didn't think I saw anyone leave, so that's pretty good for me. I hope you had a good show.